So let's start by adding a quad that we can add our ground texture to. Next, I'll go to the textures folder and I'll select the ground texture and just drag it onto the quad. I've also rotated the quad 90 degrees in the X. That way the ground texture is now facing upwards. And I'll finish off by increasing its size to 50 by 50. So that should give us a good play area. Next, I'm going to increase the tile in the material. So I'll increase it to 25 by 25. So that way, when my character has a camera which is close to the ground texture will seem high resolution. Next, let's add some lighting. Since this is a dark asset pack which has lots of gravestones and cemetery assets, let's make this a night scene. So I'll add in a directional light, but I'll try to mimic moonlight. So using Ctrl-Shift-F, I'll aim it towards the ground. And next I'll set its color to a dark blue. Okay, now let's start laying out some of the assets we downloaded. So I'll go over to prefabs and let's start with something in the cemetery folder. Let's just drag in a gravestone. And we'll just drag in a bunch of different varieties. Now, so I don't clutter up my hierarchy, I'm going to create a new game object, which is an empty game object. I'm going to call it cemetery. And then I'll go ahead and drag in all the gravestones into the cemetery game object. This results in two things. First, they're more organized in the scene hierarchy. The second thing is if I move the cemetery object, they all move together. Yet I can still go in and move each gravestone relative to the group. I've also laid out a couple more objects such as tombstones and coffins. So next I'd like to show you how to align objects with snapping. So I'll select one of the gates. Let's go with this one. And I'll drag it in. Then I'll reset its position. And what I'll do at this point is hold down Control and start to move it. And you can see it snaps. Then I'll Control-C, Control-V to copy and paste. And again, I'll hold Control and snap it. And as you can see, it aligns up very nicely. I'm just going to repeat that process. So I've added a fence post here and I used the same snap technique. Then I copied and pasted one of these fence pieces. What I'm going to do now is rotate it by 90 in the Y. And then again, I'm just going to snap it. And it's looking pretty good. Now, another technique we can do is when we have multiple objects selected, we can copy and paste them and snap them as one group. So once again, our scene is getting a little bit crowded. So what I'm going to do is select everything that involves our fence, and I'm just going to move it to the final position. Essentially, we don't want the player to walk off the map, so I'm going to create a perimeter for the player. So that seems pretty good. I still want some sort of gap so that he doesn't see over the edge. Next, I'll create an empty game object. I'll call it fence. And be sure to reset the position so that it's in the center of the map. And then we'll drag all the fence pieces into our fence game object. So now that I'm happy with one of the sides, I'll select it and then I'll Control, copy and paste. And then again, I'll just hold Control and snap it into position and zoom in just to double check everything's good. Yeah, looks good. And I did a repeat of that process for the last side of the fence. And overall, we have a nice perimeter now. But this looks just a little bit odd because there's no doors for the player to enter and exit. Go ahead and fix that by dropping in half of a door, resetting its position, and duplicating it, snapping it out, and we'll rotate it. Sorry, that should be 180. And continuing to snap. And so now we have a door. So now we just need to put it in position. Okay, next what we want to do to allow this door to snap properly is create its own game object. So again, repeat the process. I'm going to call it door, reset its position. And what we have to do is get the two gates to line up so that the center is at the center of this door game object. So what I'm going to do is I'll snap it so that it lines up to its center. And then once I have that done, I'll just drag them into the door. Next, I'll select one of the gates that is in the center. So that looks pretty good. And I'll delete that. Then I'll select our door, rotate it 90 degrees, and then snap it into place. So that didn't snap exactly as I would have hoped. So what I did was I fixed the gate positions. Initially it was 3 and -2. So I just set them to opposite. So 2.5 and -2.5. And then I just inched the door into place on its x-axis. So it's looking pretty good overall. So now I'm just going to take our door and drag it into our fence game object. Okay, so I've added a couple more things, such as these larger tombs, and I've added some dust from the decal folder. And I'll show you a little technique for placing things like dust. So I just made a duplicate of the ones I've already placed. And by clicking this blue area in our gizmo, it allows me to drag it on the X and Z axis while ignoring the Y. So it'll stay placed on the ground and I can just slide it on the ground anywhere I'd like. Now to create some inconsistencies, I rotate it on the Y. And again, I'll just copy and paste, move it around, and rotate on the Y. And so that looks pretty good. I just also quickly changed the ground texture to a fallen leaf texture from the asset we downloaded. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the amount of objects I have in my scene. As you can see, I've added some statues, a glow from this large tomb, grass, trees, and the glow I added to the tomb is just another asset from the pack. If you'd like to add it, it's called Bloom and it's located in the decal folder.